We're going to find y in this problem. We're going to find y. Now, these are parallel lines. Remember, this is a parallelogram. What do we know about this angle and this angle?
They're equal.
They're equal, so this has to be 73 degrees also, right? And if I extended this out and treated it like parallel lines and a transversal, what do we know about these two angles? Remember? What are these called? Alternate interior angles. And what do we know about alternate interior angles? Right, they're congruent. So y would equal 73 degrees. There are many ways to attempt that. You could have done like 107 and 107 here and then minus 180. That's fine. But one way of doing it. All right, so today we're talking about 3 different types of parallelograms: rectangles, rhombus, and squares. Rectangles are quadrilaterals. They're parallelograms. They have 4 right angles. Opposite, and then, parallelograms, all the factors that apply to parallelogram. Opposite sides are equal. Opposite angles are equal. Of course, they're all 90. The diagonals bisect each other. All those things apply. A rhombus is a quadrilateral. It is also a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. The angle measurements may be different, and probably are different. Again, a rhombus, all the things for a parallelogram still apply. A square is also a quadrilateral. It's also a parallelogram. It has 4 right angles, 4 congruent sides. A square is considered to be both a rectangle and a rhombus. The square is considered to be both a rectangle and a rhombus. So not only does it ask you, is it a rectangle? You'll say yes. It asks you if the square is a rhombus. You'll say yes. It's both. Okay, so properties of rectangles. Remember, squares have all of these. Now remember, they also have the properties of a parallelogram. So you have to remember all of those that we talked about last class. But specific for rectangles and squares. It should be in your packet. So for all your properties of rectangles, not only are they parallelograms, so if you need to write that, all properties of parallelograms. So all of those from the last class apply. Plus, in a rectangle and a square, opposite sides are congruent. Okay, we've talked about that before. Opposite angles are congruent. Talked about that before. Consecutive angles are supplementary. I talked about that before. Diagonals bisect each other. They talked about that before. But here's a different thing. All 4 angles are right angles. They're 90 degrees. And the diagonals are congruent. So that's something new. Remember we talked about that when you bisect your angle? Remember? We said they bisect, but both of them are the same measurement. That's the only thing different. And that's their 90-degree angles.
Is 6.4, 6.5?
So diagonals are congruent. You follow those? That's the only thing different from last class. Can I go up? All right. Remember, squares are both rectangles and rhombus, so they follow both of those. Diagonals are perpendicular. Okay, so a rhombus can kind of look like a diamond or whatnot, but not only do the diagonals bisect each other like they did with the parallelogram, but they create a 90-degree angle. Okay, they create little right triangles. You see that? 4 little right triangles? All right, and each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger, and this is a rhombus, so, all sides are equal. We talked about that just a while ago. And the diagonals bisect the opposite angle. So these angles are bisected. And I'm making 2 for these. They don't have to be the same measurement. Okay, and of course, if it was a square, you bisected, the angles are going to be 45 degrees, right? But a rhombus, it doesn't have to be unless it's specifically a square. Any questions about those? Again, rhombus fit under all the parallelogram properties, plus those two extras. Good. A square is a rhombus, but a rhombus doesn't have to be a square. Okay? A square is always a rhombus. It's always a rectangle. But a rhombus does not always have to be a square. All right, so here's the big Venn diagram. We have quadrilaterals, four-sided figures. And inside of those four-sided figures, okay, quadrilaterals, there's one type. One type of quadrilateral is a parallelogram. And inside of those parallelograms, we have rectangles, squares, and rhombus. Squares are in both the rectangle and rhombus category. Everybody see that? Figure that out? All right, parallelograms. All right. Then inside of parallelograms, you have rectangles, squares, and rhombus. All right, so we're going to determine whether each statement is always, sometimes, or never true. The diagonal of a rectangular is perpendicular. Does it create a 90-degree angle? Okay, we're determining whether the statement is always, sometimes, or never true. The diagonal of a rectangle is perpendicular. Okay, why would you say it's true? Prove it. Okay, so perpendicular means it creates a 90-degree angle. And why did you say that it's true? Where have we talked about rectangles being 90-degree angles? Not all parallelograms are that way. I'm saying rectangles. So, right. You said it could be a square, and that's true. That are all rectangle squares. So what's your answer? Always, sometimes, or never. It is a question. Okay. It's only perpendicular if it's a rhombus. You got me? Ones we just talked about a couple pages ago? It's only perpendicular if it's a rhombus. And a square is both a rhombus and a rectangle. So it's only sometimes. And it only works if it's a square. In this case. All right. Consecutive sides of a rhombus are congruent. Sometimes, always, or never. The very next. What's the property of a rhombus? What do we know about rhombus? What do we know about rhombus? Right. What do you know about a square? Good. And a square is a rhombus, so all sides are equal. All right. Because all sides are equal, that means the consecutive sides, the very next sides, are what? Equal. And congruent means equal. So are consecutive sides of rhombus congruent? Always. All right, on 3. A rectangle has at least one right angle. True? Always, sometimes, or never? Always. A rectangle has how many? Always 4. The diagonals of a parallelogram are congruent. Sometimes, always, or never? You said never, you said sometimes, somebody said always. Prove it. Tell me when. Why? Good. A rectangle is a parallelogram, and those are the only ones, so it is sometimes. And it only happens with rectangles. You had to prove it. A diagonal of a square bisects opposite angles. Sometimes, always, or never. When? You said always?
Because all four sides are equal.
Yeah. Okay, a diagonal doesn't go through the angle at all? Yeah, I think if I drew a diagonal of a four-sided figure, the diagonal goes between the two vertices across from each other. No, bisect means to cut in two. So sometimes, always, or never? It's always. Because it's a rhombus, a square is a rhombus, and rhombus always does that. Use the rhombus DLMP to determine whether each statement is true or false. All right, so this is if. If OM is 13, okay, or excuse me, if it's what's given, is OM 13 true or false? Okay, all we know is that it is a rhombus. And it is true because diagonals bisect each other. So the other side must also be 13. PL, is it 26? True or false? True? Everybody? Everybody says true. Good, I don't know, and it would be false because it doesn't have any information. It is not a rectangle. It does not tell me it's a rectangle, and rectangles are the only ones that the diagonals are the same. All right, so number 8. MD is congruent with PL. True or false? Okay, well, it should be false because we just stated that PL can't be 26, but DM would be 26. So that's false. Number 9. The measure of an angle DLO, so DLO, this angle right here, is equal to the measure of LDO. LDO. True or false? Okay, it is a rhombus. You said what? It's got to be one or the other. I'll go back to your picture so you can see it. True or false? Well, think about it. We know that a rhombus, that creates a 90-degree angle. So are both of those 45? Why do you say no? Because they're what? Because they are 45? Okay, so the only way that they could be 45 is if it's a square. Is this a square? Okay, 180 does make a triangle, but do they both have to be 45? Oh, that'd be the only way that this would be true. Okay, so it's false because it's not a square. That's not true. That is false. All right, so number 10. Angle LDP. LDP, this whole angle right here, is congruent with angle LMP. Is that true? Well, in parallelograms, opposite angles have to be congruent. So that is true. The measure of angle DPM, now this one, measure of angle DPM is congruent with the measure of angle PML. So I'm looking at that angle measurement and this angle measurement. Are they congruent? No, they're only congruent if it's a square or a rectangle. So that's false. Okay. So we've dealt with so far rectangles, squares, and rhombus. We've got trapezoids to add on and kites. All right, trapezoids, the quadrilateral. It's not a parallelogram. Are you with me? Trapezoids is not a parallelogram. It has exactly one pair of parallel sides. Parallel sides are called bases. You need to know these terms. And the non-parallel sides are called legs. In a trapezoid, E, F, G, H. Angle E and F are called the base angles. Angles H and G are called the other pair of base angles. So there's two sets of base angles. There's a nice little picture. On trapezoids, you've got two bases, you've got two legs. Notice the bases are the parallel sides. The legs are not. There's more specific type of trapezoid called an isosceles trapezoid. That means the legs are the same length. You're going to have to know these, be able to recognize them. Okay, also, the base angles. The top base angles are the same. The bottom base angles are the same. And that only works with an isosceles trapezoid. Okay?
What is it in isosceles mean?
Isosceles means at least two sides are congruent. All right, the next thing. These theorems represent trapezoids. You need to understand them and be able to use them. Both pairs of base angles and isosceles trapezoid are congruent. We just talked about that. The bottom ones are the same. The top ones are the same, and that only works with an isosceles. The diagonals of isosceles trapezoid are congruent. Kind of works like the, you've got to realize this whole thing, maybe it's not bisected. They're equal. Okay? This is equal to this one. All right, the whole side, not just the little base part. The whole diagonal is congruent. Last part is the medians, and we've talked about medians before, but these are specific to a trapezoid. The median, okay, of a trapezoid is parallel to the bases. They're all parallel. So if you're looking for angle measurements, remember you treat them like parallel lines and transversals. Okay, these two add up to be 180. This one and this one up here and this one down here, corresponding parts, they'll be the same measurement. All right, the measure is 1/2 the sum of the measures of the bases. So if I called this base 1, base 2, and this is the median, the formula would be this. The median equals 1/2 of the bases added together. Okay. That length of the segment would be 1/2 of your two bases added together. It's on the next page. All right, that's a formula. You need to know it, be able to use it. Also, a quick thing to know is this segment, and this works for any trapezoid, not just the isosceles. This segment and this segment are cut in half. This segment and this segment are cut in half. If it's an isosceles, of course, they're all four going to be the same length. But it may not be an isosceles. This works for any trapezoid. All right, so we have a picture here. HJKL is an isosceles trapezoid with the base HJ and LK, and the median is RS. Use the given information to solve each problem. If means it changes each problem. LK is 30. And HJ is 42. What is RS? Well, remember, RS is the median. is a half of your bases added together. Right? So 30 plus 42 is 72, and 72 divided by 2 is 36. Very good. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to move it down and do the next problem. I'm going to erase this part and try again. If RS is 17, HJ is 14, find LK. Well, you set it up the same way, but we know RS is 17. We know it is half of these things added together. 14 plus, we don't know what this is, LK. Okay? How do you get rid of a half times something else? You can divide it by both sides, or you can multiply by the reciprocal, right? So if I multiply both sides by 2, I get 34 equals 14 plus LK. I subtract 14 from both sides, and I get 20 equals LK. Okay, you can multiply by the reciprocal, or you can divide by half. If you divide by half, make sure you use parentheses. Yes. Okay with that? Any questions? You'll have ones like this on your test. If RS is x plus 5, and these added together, your bases added together is 4x plus 6. You really just have this. Your median equals a half times 4x plus 6, right? Distribute. So half of 4 is 2x, and half of 6 is 3. Get your x's on the same side. Subtract x from both sides. 2 minus 1 is x. Subtract 3 from both sides. Very good. So x equals 2. But it didn't want x. It wanted what is RS. So RS is 7. Very good. All right, last one for this part. It's a measure of angle LRS. This right here is 66 degrees. Find the measure of KSR. This measurement right here. What do we know about trapezoids? Look at it as a small trapezoid. You see that small trapezoid? It's an isosceles trapezoid right here. An isosceles. And what do we know about isosceles trapezoids? Their base angles are equal, right? So base angles are equal. So that one's going to be 66 degrees. All right, the next one. Guys, you need to know this. Quadrilaterals, remember a while ago we talked about the parallelograms? There's also trapezoids, more specifically isosceles trapezoids. And then over here in their own little world are kites. You need to add the kites because we're going to add and talk about them. Kites. Last thing I'm going to talk about is kites. All right, kites. What you need to know about them. Of course, they kind of look like a diamond. All right. Specific things about kites. 2 consecutive sides are always congruent. Those 2 would be congruent. These 2 would be congruent. That's something to know. Also, when you're dealing with the kite, the angle that connects the non-congruent sides, they're both equal. Okay? They're both equal. Last thing when I'm dealing with kites is their diagonals are perpendicular. Okay? The diagonals are perpendicular, so they make 4 right triangles. Of course, this triangle and this triangle, the 2 top ones are going to be the same, and the 2 bottom ones are going to be the same. So if you're looking for angle measurements, you can use things that solve for right triangles to find them, like the Pythagorean theorem, right? If you're looking for side lengths, if you know 2 of them, you can find the third one.